Hey everybody, Mockingbird, chapter 28. I have a new shirt on. Can you see it? It says Boo Radley's. There's a store in a mall in Washington, Seattle, somewhere up there. And it's called Boo Radley's. That is actually, if you know, on my costume, I have every page on my wall. That actually came from, I saw it at this store there. They had every page up there and I loved it. So chapter 28. We left off. Where did we leave off? Oh, the um, three things happened. Bob Ewell got a job and lost the job. Somebody robbed or tried to rob Judge Taylor's house. We're led to believe that might have been Bob Ewell. And Bob Ewell was chasing Helen Robinson, kind of yelling at her on her way to work, and Link Dees yelled at him. There was a prank played on Mrs. Tootie and Mrs. Fruity. So that was a year ago. So this year for Halloween, they were going to have a pageant. And Scout has her costume, I believe. Yes, she is a ham. Chicken wire, two little peepholes. That's Scout for Halloween, for the pageant. Chapter 27 ended with this little line. After that, it didn't matter whether they went out or not. Jem said he would take me. Thus began our longest journey together. That line's important. 28, here we go. The weather was unusually warm for the last days of October. We didn't even need jackets. The wind was growing stronger, and Jem said it might be raining before we got home. There was no moon. The street light on the corner cast sharp shadows on the Radley house. I heard Jem laugh softly. Bet nobody bothers them tonight, he said. Jem was carrying my ham costume, rather awkwardly, as it was hard to hold. I thought it gallant of him to do so. It's a scary place, though, ain't it? I said. Who doesn't mean anybody any harm, but I'm right glad you're along. You know Atticus wouldn't let you go to the schoolhouse by yourself, Jem said. I don't see why. It's just around the corner and across the yard. That yard's a mighty long place for little girls to cross at night, Jem teased. Aren't you scared of haints? We laughed. Haints, hot steams, incantations, secret signs had vanished with our years as mist with the sunrise. What was that old thing? Jem said. Angel bright, life and death, get off the road, don't suck my breath. Cut it out now, I said. We were in front of the Radley place. Jem said, Boo must not be home. Listen. High above us in the darkness, a solitary mockingbird poured out his repertoire in blissful unawareness of whose tree it sat in, plunging from the shrill key of the sunflower bird to the irascible quack of a blue jay, to the sad lament of poor Will, poor Will, poor Will. We turned the corner, and I tripped on a root growing in the road. Jem tried to help me, but all he did was drop my costume in the dust. I didn't fall, though, and soon we were on our way again. We turned off the road and entered the schoolyard. It was pitch black. Remember, there's no moon. How do you know where we're at, Jem? I asked when we had gone a few steps. I can tell we're under the big oak tree because we're passing through a cool spot. Careful now, don't fall again. We had slowed to a cautious gait, slow, and we were feeling our way forward so as not to bump into the tree. The tree was a single and ancient oak. Two children could not reach around its trunk and touch hands. It was far away from teachers and their spies and curious neighbors. It was near the Radley lot, but the Radleys were not curious. A small patch of earth beneath its branches was packed hard for many fights and furtive crap games. The lights in the school auditorium were blazing in the distance, but they blinded us, if anything. Don't look ahead, Scout, Jem said. Look at the ground and you won't fall. This always reminds me of, like, if you've ever been at Jepson Junior High School in the back, there's like a path that leads back to the houses. I walk my dog back there all the time. But it reminds me of that path. There's a house right there. There's a little creek and a bridge, and then the gym is right there. But it's far enough away from the school where it's dark. So if you've ever been there, that would make some sense. If you haven't, then whatever. You should have brought a flashlight, Jem. I didn't know it was this dark. It didn't look like it'd be this dark earlier in the evening. So cloudy, that's why. It'll hold off a while, though. Someone leaped at us. God almighty, Jem yelled. A circle of light burst into our faces, and Cecil Jacobs jumped in glee behind it. Ha! Gotcha! He shrieked. I thought you'd be coming along this way. What are you doing way out here by yourself, boy? Ain't you scared of Boo Radley? Cecil had ridden safely to the auditorium with his parents, hadn't seen us, and then ventured down this far because he knew good and well we'd be coming along. He thought Mr. Finch would be with us, though. Shucks, ain't much but around the corner, said Jeb. Whew, sorry. Who's scared to go around the corner? We had to admit that Cecil was pretty good, though. He had given us a fright, and he could tell it all over the schoolhouse. That was his privilege. Say, I said, ain't you a cow tonight? Where's your costume? It's up behind the stage, he said. Mrs. Merriweather says the pageant ain't coming on for a while. You can put yours back at the stage by mine, Scout, and you can go with the rest of them. This was an excellent idea, Jem thought. He also thought it was a good thing that Cecil and I would be together. This way, Jem would be left to go with people his own age. When we reached the auditorium, the whole town was there except Atticus, and the ladies worn out from the decorating, and the usual outcasts and shut-ins. Most of the county, it seemed, was there. The hall was teeming with slicked-up country people. The high school building had a wide downstairs hallway, and people milled around booths that had been installed along each side. Oh, Jem, I forgot my money, I sighed when I saw them. Atticus didn't, Jem said. Here is 30 cents. You can do 6 things. See you later on. It's kind of like those Halloween parties when you're a little kid where you go and they you can do the fishing on the pole or the cakewalk or all those little kind of carnival games. That's what they're doing. Okay, I said, quite content with 30 cents and Cecil. I went with Cecil down to the front of the auditorium, through a door on one side and backstage. I got rid of my ham costume and departed in a hurry, for Mrs. Merriweather was standing at a lectern in front of the first row of seats, making last-minute frenzied changes in the script. How much money you got? I asked Cecil. Cecil had 30 cents too, which made us even. We squandered our first nickels on the House of Horrors, which scared us not at all. We entered the black 7th grade room and were led around by the temporary ghoul in residence and were made to touch several objects alleged to be component parts of the human being. Here are his eyes, we were told when we touched 2 peeled grapes on a saucer. Here is his heart, which felt like raw liver. These are his innards, and our hands were thrust into a plate of cold spaghetti. Oh my gosh, do you remember doing that? We used to do that. That was the Halloween party. They make you blindfold and touch those things and tell you what it was. Cecil and I visited several booths. We each bought a sack of Miss Judge Taylor's homemade divinity. I wanted to bob for apples, but Cecil said it wasn't sanitary. His mother said he might catch something from everybody's head, having been in the same tub. Ain't anything around town now to catch, I protested. But Cecil said his mother said it was unsanitary to eat after folks. I later asked Alexander about this, and she said people who held such views were usually climbers. We were told we were about to purchase a blob of taffy when Mrs. Merriweather's runners appeared and told us to go backstage. It was time to get ready. The auditorium was filling with people. The Macomb County High School band had assembled in front below the stage, and the stage footlights were on, and the red velvet curtain rippled and billowed from the scurrying going on behind it. Backstage, Cecil and I found the narrow hallway teeming with people. Adults in homemade 3-corner hats, Confederate caps, Spanish-American war hats, and World War helmets. Children dressed as various agricultural enterprises crowded around one small window. Somebody smashed my costume, I wailed in dismay. Miss Merriweather galloped to me, reshaped the chicken wire, and thrust me inside. I love the verbs there. Galloped, reshaped, and thrust me, shoved her back into the chicken wire. You know, the chicken wires, those little hexagonal things, like the little wire that's got in those shapes. Okay. Y'all right in there, Scout? Asked Cecil. You sound so far off, like you was on the other side of a hill. You don't sound any nearer, I said. The band played the national anthem, and we heard the audience rise. Then the bass drum sounded. Mrs. Merriweather, stationed behind her lectern beside the band, said, Macomb County, ad astra per aspera. The bass drum boomed again. That means, said Mrs. Merriweather, translating for the rustic elements, from the mud to the stars. She added, unnecessarily, it seemed to me, a pageant. Reckon they wouldn't know what it was if she didn't tell them, whispered Cecil, who was immediately shushed. The whole town knows it, I breathed. But the country folks have come in, Cecil said. Be quiet back there, a man's voice ordered, and we were silent. The bass drum went boom with every sentence Mrs. Merriweather uttered. She chanted mournfully about Macomb County being older than the state, that it was part of Mississippi and Alabama territories, that the first white man to set foot in the virgin forest was the probate judge's great-grandfather 5 times removed, who was never heard of again. Then came the fearless Colonel Macomb, for whom the county was named. Andrew Jackson appointed him to a position of authority, and Colonel Macomb's misplaced self-confidence and slender sense of direction brought disaster to all who rode with him in the Creek Indian Wars. Colonel Macomb persevered in his efforts to make the region safe for democracy, but his first campaign was his last. His orders, relayed to him by a friendly Indian runner, were to move south. After consulting the tree to ascertain from its lichen, which way was south, and taking no lip from the subordinates who ventured to correct him, Colonel Macomb set out on a purposeful journey to rout the enemy and entangled his troops so far northwest in the forest primeval that they were eventually rescued by settlers moving inland. So basically, Macomb was named after a dude that was like overconfident, went the wrong way, and wouldn't admit that he was wrong. Mrs. Merriweather gave a 30-minute description of Colonel Macomb's exploits. I discovered that if I bent my knees, I could tuck them under my costume and more or less sit. I sat down, listened to Miss Merriweather's drone and the bass drum's boom, and was soon fast asleep. They said later that Mrs. Merriweather was putting her all into the grand finale, that she had crooned "pork" with a confidence born of pine trees and butter beans entering on cue. She waited a few seconds and then called, "Pork?" When nothing materialized, she yelled, "Pork!" I must have heard her in my sleep, or the band played Dixie woke me up. But it was when Mrs. Merriweather triumphantly mounted the stage with the state flag that I chose to make my entrance. Chose is incorrect. I thought I'd better catch up with the rest of them. So Scout falls asleep. They yell pork, she doesn't come. They yell pork again, she doesn't come. Third time they yell pork, and she's like, "Woo!" And she goes bouncing onto the stage, late, bouncing into everybody. They told me later Judge Taylor went out behind the auditorium and stood there slapping his knees so hard, Mrs. Taylor brought him a glass of water and one of his pills. Mrs. Merriweather seemed to have a hit. Everybody was cheering so, but she caught me backstage and told me I had ruined her pageant. She made me feel awful, but when Jem came to fetch me, he was sympathetic. He said he couldn't see my costume much from where he was sitting. How he could tell I was feeling bad under my costume, I don't know, but he said I did all right, I just came in a little late. That was all. Jem was becoming almost as good as Atticus at making you feel right when things went wrong. Almost. Not even Jem could make me go through that crowd, and he consented to wait backstage with me until the audience left. I'm going to do a part 2 on this one.